Well, let's get reaction now from political commentator John Wight, who joins us live. Mr. Wight, thank you for coming onto the programme. We've heard that John Kerry is in Europe at the moment trying to drum up international support. How big are his chances of forming a coalition of the willing, do you think?
Well, at this point, they look very, very distant. This is an increasingly desperate administration. And what we saw at the G20 was the end of an era. We saw the end of Washington's unipolarity. The world is no longer going to bend the knee to a US president, and it's no longer going to acquiesce to the writ of Washington, wherever it decides it must run. So this is the end of an era. John Kerry and the Obama administration in general is completely isolated in the court of world opinion and increasingly isolated in the opinion of its own people, according to the latest opinion polls, because people understand what is at stake with this. What we are talking about is the prospect of a US administration, a US government, entering into a military alliance with Al-Qaeda in Syria. That's what we're talking about here. People understand that those are the stakes involved, and quite clearly they are appalled.
Well, this matter will go to vote in Congress probably next week. What are the chances, do you think, that they will vote in favour of intervention?
Well, it's going to be very interesting, isn't it? The momentous vote taken by the British Parliament last week has allowed anti-war sentiment to develop and incubate in the US and within the US Congress. The only thing I would say is, because the ships have already been deployed, the aircraft are deployed, the plans are in place, no Congress, I think, will want to set a precedent whereby it boxes in a US president from taking military action. However, that said, the anti-war sentiment that is rising in the US amongst the American people is certainly being felt within Washington, and it's certainly been the catalyst for increasing voices of dissent within the US military itself. So this is going to be the defining week of the Obama presidency.
And do you think he has to listen to all that concern from the American people? Because the tone he is giving is that actually he doesn't have to listen to anyone.
Well, I think this again reflects his desperation. He's trying to appear strong whilst standing in quicksand, political quicksand. He is in reality between a rock and a hard place. If he receives congressional approval and goes ahead with this military strike, using that as a mandate, it will be a clear breach of international law. However, if he does not receive congressional approval and doesn't go ahead with this military strike, he will appear weak within the eyes of the hawks, within the US establishment and amongst his own people. So he is really between a rock and a hard place.
And do you think he will try to buy time by waiting for the results of the UN probe into whether chemical weapons were used?
Yes, this is clearly an attempt to create some breathing space so that he can persuade people within Washington, people who are hesitant to come on board, to get their support and to try and make the case within the America itself, amongst his own people. I think he's going to address the country, the United States, on Tuesday, and this will be a last-ditch effort to alleviate concerns that there will be boots on the ground and so forth. But I don't think that boots on the ground is the basis of the concern within the United States. They are tired of a decade of endless wars, and they know the stakes involved in this particular situation, this issue. So we're talking about expanding a regional conflict, and we are talking about the United States government entering effectively into a military alliance with the same ideology responsible for the atrocity on 9/11, the 7/7 bomb in London, the Madrid bomb, and most recently the horrific murder of Lee Rigby in London.
And do you think the results of this UN probe will actually achieve anything? Because they're not actually trying to blame anyone, are they? And that seems to be the whole debate. Who is to blame?
No, I think the UN investigation is tangential to the wider issue. The Obama administration, if you recall, was intent on taking military action last week before the findings of the UN team had actually been revealed. So the UN investigation, I think, is just embroidery. It's clear from the outset that the UN investigation will not be capable of attributing the provenance of the chemical weapons that were allegedly used, only that if they were used and what they were. But we do know from a prior UN investigation led by UN Special Investigator Carla Del Ponte in May that there was a strong likelihood that the rebels had sarin and had used it. This is based on her questioning of victims of that previous attack in Turkey. So this really does bear all the hallmarks of a setup, and it is propelling the United States towards a military, political disaster. And what should not be forgotten, and the most important aspect to all this, is as we speak, the Syrian people are living with a gun to their heads in the shape of cruise missiles. They don't know if these missiles are going to be fired or not, and that's an awful thing to contemplate. This is a form of torture that the Syrian people are undergoing right now.
OK, thank you, Mr. Wight. We do have to leave it there. That's John Wight, a political commentator, live from Edinburgh. Thank you.